Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So my name is Cory Imig, and tonight I'm going to give you a brief overview of my work and talk a little bit about my studio practice in general. I consider myself an installation artist, and that's not necessarily because everything that I make is an installation, but it's because space is a very important component of everything that I make. I'm going to take you back before I talk about what I consider my recent work. I want to talk a little bit about what came before and how I got to what I'm making now, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about these pieces, but I do think it's important to mention them because they have been on my mind a lot recently. I got my undergraduate degree in fiber, and I wasn't interested necessarily in the traditional materials or the traditional processes related to the field, but I was very interested in pattern, repetition, structure, and time. Ideas that I find inherent to fiber processes. The last year of my BFA, I was very interested in documenting my daily life. I mapped my movements, I kept track of how I spent my time, and I spent a lot of time observing others. This resulted in a series of work I now call Documenting the Day. And I have a couple examples I'm going to show you from this series. So I did do my undergraduate degree in Savannah, Georgia, which is why we are looking at a map of Savannah, Georgia, made out of Lego. I documented everywhere that over the course of a month that I went. Each of the Lego colors represents a different day of the week. Towers were formed on the places I frequented, and patterns were formed on the places I went, specific days. Another piece in this series, I spent a lot of time during this time just sitting and observing. This piece, the brightest color that everyone was wearing that entered Broadway Cafe on February 1st, 2010 from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. is made using Home Depot paint samples that were literally cut on site and adhered to this paper. So I was doing several exercises like this. This was about a 3-year period that I was doing things like this. Also during the time, I was working in a restaurant, and every shift, I would write down the names of every customer that paid with a credit card, and these didn't, they just existed as note cards that I had kept in the studio. And the last piece from this early work is a piece called Conversations, where this was really before I was using my cell phone in the way that I use it now, but I had a hidden voice recorder on myself, and I recorded everything that I said over the course of a day. I then listened to that recording, transcribed it, and painted it on a 12-foot by 12-foot wall. I was doing these different exercises because I was interested in documentation and the patterns that emerged that I didn't expect. It was also a way to keep myself present and engaged in my everyday. I was forcing myself to pay attention, and usually it was involved paying attention to things that we don't usually pay attention to. So in 2011, my work took a shift. I moved studio spaces, and the work grew in scale. It became more immersive, it became less about collecting and analyzing information, and it became much more about play. This is when I started to become much more interested in space and how that can become an active component of the work. This was one of my first installations, which consisted of 5 12-foot boards leaning against a balloon. This work was exciting to me. It was a little bit dangerous and completely uncontrollable. It was all perfectly balanced. If the balloon popped or the board shifted, the whole piece would move and potentially fall. The inherent tension in the work was really appealing to me. Oftentimes, a key strategy in these installations is how they change during the time they are installed. Components of the work can move fast or slow. Elements shift, stretch, or pop when tension loosens and gravity becomes apparent. These various timescales exist not only in the work, but in the site itself. As the work continued to evolve, I was thinking more about space, scale, and architecture. I realized that the space the work is installed in is not just an important part, but it is just as important as the work going into it. I started to question the term site-specific to describe these installations. Instead, I started to use the term site-sensitive. It is important to me to consider how the viewers interact in the space and allow the work to accommodate that. The walls become a frame for the work. By referring to the work as site-sensitive, I'm hoping to equalize the balance between place and time. I respond specifically to each site, allowing materials to shift and dictate relationships between one another and the space itself. By referring to the work as site-sensitive, it allows the work to expand and retract, adapting to the space and environment it is being installed. As the installations became more immersive, I asked the viewer to imagine space differently, including how it interacts with their body, how they move through it, and the objects within it. What is the relationship between two-dimensional shapes and three-dimensional forms? How can manipulations of a space foreground its changes over time? In what ways can imagined manipulation shift perceptions of a space without any physical changes at all? These are the types of questions I've been asking myself about this work. I try to answer them through a process of building, moving, observing, and rearranging the assembled spaces that surround us. These methods produced installations that alter spaces physically, visually, and temporally. The installations play with our perception of both the second and third dimensions, inviting viewers to flip back and forth between them. The work intentionally blurs the boundaries between the physical space and the work itself. It brings the viewer in as a moving component of the work. Everything is active. This includes components in the space that have been designed to disappear or that are meant to be overlooked, such as air vents, doorways, light fixtures, and exit signs. Everything is active. So in addition to the physical installations, I also play and experiment with space on a two-dimensional scale. At times, this is a practice of drawing that then translates to physical installations, and other times it becomes the work itself. In a series titled Site Proposals, I play with the space between the imagined and the real. I ask the viewer to collapse their experience of space, transforming two-dimensional Google Earth images into three-dimensional possibilities. Through physical collage, I propose possibilities just as real as the images themselves. The line between the digital and the physical becomes active. By subtly manipulating perceptual cues, the work shifts in and out of reality, slowly blurring the line between the built environment and the imaginary. This work asks the viewer to question what they are perceiving, challenging their ideas about permanence, space, and place. These manipulated images are uploaded back to Google Earth and exist alongside others' documentation of time and place. Most recently in the studio, I have been working on a series of small collages. These pieces are made using leftovers from previous installations. Cut pieces of ribbon, spray paint, pieces of paper. They act as both finished pieces, but also drawings of abstracted installations existing in distorted architectural spaces. They are quick, spontaneous, and fun to make. So I'm going to end talking a little bit about what I'm thinking about. And I was thinking a lot about this as I was putting this lecture together. I spent a lot of time thinking about this award period specifically and how much has changed in my life from being awarded this to where we are now. Of course, COVID happened. And in February of 2020, I had my first child. In May of 2020, February of 2022, I had my second child. So my art practice has had to adapt and change and make space for new things. And I've been thinking about how my work isn't built on a mastery of skill, discipline, or a set of materials, but instead on basic everyday actions. Things like cutting, counting, measuring, observing, and arranging. Most of the materials I use are purchased at hardware stores, craft stores, or even toy stores. They are everyday objects, not necessarily art materials. I've started to think about the overlap between the things that I do in studio and the things that I do as a parent. These basic motions, folding, sorting, organizing, measuring. In both my studio and my life, I'm doing these actions on repeat. These actions eventually fill a space, whether that space is a room or the time in a day. My work has always highlighted the things that can be easily overlooked, or the things that we fail to pay attention to. Whether that's the color of the clothing customers are wearing, or the corners of a museum that we aren't necessarily supposed to look at. At one point, a few years ago, someone asked me to describe my work. And my first thought was, my work is what happens if you sit perfectly still. All the things that move around you while you're sitting still is the work. I bring up these thoughts tonight because the way that I'm thinking about my work is shifting. I find myself doing exercises as a parent, such as counting the cars that pass us while driving back and forth to my parents every day, or to one of Henry's numerous appointments. I find myself thinking about my day-to-day activities, how pattern, repetition, structure, and time play a part in my life. I don't have any conclusions yet about these thoughts or how it will affect my work, but I feel like it's really important to mention them because this exhibition feels like a bridge. It feels like it's bridging my life from before to my life now. So I want to end there, and I want to say thank you all for attending this lecture tonight. I also want to say thank you to the Nerman and the Charlotte Street for supporting over the past 2 years. Thank you.